Thank you all for coming. This is a great opportunity, and we're really honored to have a national icon with us this morning, but we're even more honored to have all of you here. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your interest, and in virtually every one of your cases, thank you for all you're already doing in our community. I'd like to just quickly, where's Brandon? I want to thank Brandon and Matt for their hospitality. Brandon's done a great job. Do you want to take a second and talk about the church and the building?
Well, again, thank you guys for being here. We could have done a hand of applause here, putting this together. Also, Promise Lee helped put all this together. So thank you guys for doing this. Again, my name is Brandon. I get to serve as one of the leaders here at StoryChurch. And we are so thrilled to host conversations just like this. We had another one last night with a select group of leaders from the community that was also just beautiful. And one of the things that we're doing here, tomorrow we're 11 weeks old as a church. So we're trying to figure it out as we go a little bit still. But one of the things that we figured out is this building is just a major answer to prayer for us. And we hope an answer to prayer for our community. One of the big problems that you see with the American church is we have these big buildings that are really busy from 8 a.m. to noon on Sunday, and then 8 a.m. to noon on the next Sunday, and so on and so forth. There's not a lot happening throughout the week. And we saw that as a problem. We wanted to see what we could do to address that. And when we came here, we decided, okay, what if we, in partnership with the owner and the broker here, we were able to build something that's just different. We're building this into a community center. The new signage will go up shortly. It's going to be called Story House Collective. So Story Church is just one of the tenants here. But we have a daycare that's targeting lower income families that's moving in. We have a chef and a baker that take the commercial kitchen, and they're going to be helping us with some missional food expressions and helping with some food insecurity things in the area. We like to joke that we have a chef, a baker, and a candlestick maker. The candles on your tables are actually from a woman in our congregation that builds those as well as a small business. And then we've got a diversity and ethnicity sensitivity trainer that offers with us. Kayland Community Cares is an organization here in the neighborhood that is helping share some space with us. We're doing a number of things there. And then we have a wrestling club that meets here. They're not here this morning, but there are wrestlers that come from all over the nation to wrestle with a guy named Joe Betterman. He's a former Olympic wrestler. And kids from all over the nation come here, move here, because they want to either be collegiate or Olympic level wrestlers. And he teaches them how to wrestle, but he also teaches them character and life skills. And these are the types of things that we want to have happening in this building. So this building is full, and there's stuff going on 7 days a week here, and we couldn't be happier to be sharing space with people that are actually making a difference in our community. Yeah. And so discussions like this, where we bring people from different backgrounds, different education levels, different ethnicities, all the differences, we want to come together and say, okay, what are the things we have in common? And how can we work together to solve some of the problems in our community? And so thank you guys again for being here and for helping us along that way.
Thank you. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Brandon. I'd like to quickly also recognize Promise. Pastor Lee, Pastor Promise Lee. You don't have to sit in the back. Yeah, right. Last night, Promise brought together a whole group of grassroots leaders with whom Bob visited, and we're very, very grateful for them and their work, but particularly for Promise's leadership. So that's been great. Thank you. Bill Cadman, former State Senator Bill Cadman, who has worked tirelessly for all that we're trying to get done. And point of privilege, my daughter Ann and son Bill, his wife Dee Dee, granddaughters Hillary and Gabrielle. So thank you. So I've had a friendship with this man for over 30 years, which has been a blessing in my life and something I've enjoyed. But more importantly than what I've enjoyed is what I've learned. And he literally, in a very profound way, changed my life so that what we do to help others is more targeted and directed to outcomes and results and less to feeling good and being inside the comfort zone and inside the box. Bob does what he does, and most of you know much about that, but he will speak to that much more eloquently than I could. But he does what he does because it works. It's plain common sense. It isn't ideologically driven. It isn't really philosophically driven. It's human driven. What is it that makes a difference and generates the outcomes that everybody seeks? I want to commend to you his most recent book, Lessons from the Least of These. Please buy a copy for yourself and buy 10 for somebody else and send them to 10 of your friends. This is, how many books have you written?
6.
6. So this is the last or the most recent of 6. He will speak about his earliest book, Triumphs of Joseph. But please, the lessons that one learns from this book, the messages are really significant, and I would suggest will make a difference in your lives. This is a battle, the battle to solve poverty being defined by financial terms or behavioral terms or even educational terms. When we think about the report card on the performance of too many of our schools, needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed in a way that works, that's effective, and generates results. And that's what Bob Woodson is all about and has been about since the 60s when he was part of the civil rights movement. He will speak to what it is that had him change and the changes that have occurred in his life. But words cannot describe how important and how significant his work really is and how important it is for each of us to support him, do what you can to be helpful to his mission, and also to advance in your own world the kind of principles and practices that he's done throughout his life and that have worked so effectively. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and a privilege to have Bob Woodson in Colorado Springs and to have him here this morning. Bob?
Thank you. I'm going to bring up and introduce my colleagues who are traveling with me, Curtis Watkins and Sylvia Bennett Stone. So I'm gonna bring you up in a little bit because I want them to share. Sylvia was interviewed by one of our colleagues, Glenn Lowry, on his podcast. It's very popular, and it is blowing up. The comments, the outpouring of it, and because America is ready for truth. And I'd like to just share with you my journey as how I migrated from a civil rights leader in the 60s to conservatism. I was leading demonstrations in Barrett Rustin's hometown of Westchester, Pennsylvania, about 30 miles west of Philadelphia, as a young civil rights leader. And we were demonstrating outside of a pharmaceutical company for 2 months for them to desegregate their workforce. And when they did, they hired 9 black PhD chemists And we asked them to join our movement. They said they got these jobs because they were qualified, not because of the sacrifices of those on the picket line who were janitors, hairdressers, factory workers, seeking to get jobs. This happened 2 or 3 times, and I realized that the people many who suffered and sacrificed most did not benefit from the change. I also left the movement on the issue of force busing for integration. I believe the opposite of segregation is not integration, is desegregation. Pluralism is the goal. I go to a black church not because I'm compelled to, because I enjoy being there. And I don't think a stigma should be attached to my choice. And so that got me in trouble with the civil rights movement because they were talking about integration. Because if you support integration as a goal, it means anything is all black is all bad. And I remember debating Julius Chambers from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at the New York Bar Association on this very topic of whether we should be pursuing integration or should we be pursuing excellence. And so, and I said to him about halfway through the debate, if you have 2 situations, A, where there is the presence of educational excellence and the school is all black, and the school situation B, where there's integrated and there's diminished excellence, where should we send our children? He said B. I said, we have no debate. We just have a different understanding on that. And so this meant that I realized early on that the biggest challenge we faced after the civil rights laws were passed was not a race issue, but a class issue. That many of those who sacrificed did not benefit from the change. And so I realized that I was in the wrong struggle. So I left the movement to work on behalf of low-income people of all races. Because if you generalize about any group and say that all whites, all blacks, anytime you generalize about a group, and then you try to apply remedies, the solutions will always benefit those at the top at the expense of those at the bottom. Just like with this recent 1619, this Coca-Cola saying, well, we want to hire, we're going to help blacks by requiring all law firms doing business with our company to have 30% black lawyers. Well, tell me how having a black lawyer helps somebody in public housing who's poor. And that is what I call a bait and switch game. You use as bait the low-income conditions or challenges people face as the bait, and when the remedies arrive, it goes to those who are non-poor. And that's the same with women. You cannot generalize about women in the Me Too movement because it means that, and then what are the remedies? Women should be on boards of directors. Women should be hired in corporations. Well, what about the women who are in our prisons being assaulted by their guards? If you look at it through a racial prism, when evil wears a black face, you will not address it. Geraldo Rivera did a 2-hour special on sexual assault on women in prisons. Every one of the victims was black. Every one of the victimizers was black. It didn't generate any discussion. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if we continue to look at life through a racial prism, we will not apply the kind of remedies that are needed to help those who are most vulnerable. The Lord says, as you do it unto the least of these, you do it unto me. But we are sacrificing the conditions of the least of these are going unmet and unchallenged. And that's why what is being done today by radical progressives is so injurious to our country. We are in a cultural war. Because the left is trying to use America's birth defect of slavery as the bludgeon to destroy our civic institutions. They don't care about justice for blacks. All they're interested in destroying these institutions, and they're using the black community and the history of slavery in America. And this was best summarized in 1619, this report generated by the New York Times that's now been adapted by the Pulitzer Institution and it's finding its way in every one of our public school systems now. Is teaching critical race theory. All blacks are victims. So where do you go from there? What does success look like? And so we believe that, the challenge we face is cultural. And let me read from Samuel Adams, who talked about the challenge. But I want to spend some time not just talking about the problem, but what are solutions? What is a pathway forward? People are never motivated to change and improve by constantly reminding them of injuries to be avoided. We must talk about victories that are possible, and I want to share with you victories that are possible. But just reading briefly from Samuel Adams, he said, a general dissolution of principles and manners will shortly overthrow the liberties of America than the whole force of a common enemy. While the people are virtuous, they cannot be subdued, but when they lose their virtue, they'll be ready to surrender their liberties to the first external or internal invader. If virtue and knowledge are diffused among the people, they will never be enslaved, and this will be their great security. Neither the wisest constitution or the wisest laws will secure the liberties and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. That's the challenge. And so what we're doing at the Woodson Center is that we're challenging what the left is saying, that America should be defined by its slave past. And so what we're doing with our 1776, since they're using the black community as the messenger to denigrate the values of the nation, we feel it's important that the messenger also be black, led, but participated in by every. To push back against that, to reaffirm the fact that America's birth date is 1776. Now, what the left is saying is that the problems of the 70% out of wedlock births, the violence and the crime and the disorganization that you're witnessing in urban centers over the last 50 years is attributable to the legacy of slavery and discrimination and Jim Crow. And that's the false and misleading information that they're. So what we've done at 1776, what our 23 scholars and activists, is we are challenging not to a debate, we're offering an alternative narrative that demonstrates that this is not true, that America, the plight of black America can never be justified by slavery and Jim Crow. Our history, and so to refute that, what our essays that came out, I think, next week is called Red, White, and Black, where we challenge the false history and race hustlers. We have race hustlers on the cover. And what we are saying and I'd like just to walk you through some of the information that our young people, we've taken some of this data that we've collected and put it into school curriculum, K through 12, and we issued the first 4 lessons 4 weeks ago, and we had 11,000 downloads. 16, 19 had only 4,500 in a whole year. We had 11,000 in 3 weeks. That's how thirsty Americans are for accurate history. They say that black American, and so one of our scholars looked at the records of 6 major plantations following slavery. They found that 70% or 75% of the slave families had a man and a woman raising children. They were nuclear families. And they rushed to marry afterwards. And the nuclear families in the black community continued for a whole century through all. There were 20 blacks who were born slaves who died millionaires using the framework of the free enterprise system. One of them, Robert Smalls, was born in Sumter, South Carolina, and he became a crewman on a southern supply ship. And when his bosses or his masters went into the town, he stole the ship, put on his master's jacket and his hat, and gave the proper hand signals and came through 5 different southern garrisons and turned the ship over to the Union Army, a Navy rather. And he was celebrated throughout the North. And because of his heroic actions, Lincoln allowed blacks to fight in the Civil War. Well, after the war was over, he became a successful businessman. And during Reconstruction, he got elected to the House of Representatives. He went back and purchased a plantation on which he was a slave. And since the wife and the children of the slave owner were destitute, he took them into his home. And because she was delusional and didn't realize that slavery had ended, he let her to stay into the master bedroom until she died. Now, Robert Small is an example of radical grace in action. And if a man who was enslaved is able to go back and purchase the plantation on which he was a slave and had the acts of forgiveness in his heart to take in the slave family, how could some black with a PhD from Harvard making six figures be angry today? And there are other examples of success. We say that education gap is wider today. Well, in 1940 to 1950, 1920 to 1940, the education gap in the South with blacks was 3 years. Whites was 8th grade, 5th grade for blacks. That was back in 1920, 1940. Julius Rosenwald of Sears partnered with Booker T. Washington, and he put up $4 million to build schools in the South. The black community raised a matching amount of $4.8 million. And they built 5,000 Rosenwald schools in the South. There are more Rosenwald schools than there are McDonald's today in the South. And because of these, their schools were operating at twice the amount of children in there, overcrowding, used textbooks, half the budgets. And studies revealed that in just 20 years, the education gap closed from within 6 months, from 3 years to 6 months. The question that I raised is if black community, when racism was enshrined in law, they were able to close the education gap within 6 months, why aren't they able to do that today in urban centers where blacks have been running the education system for 50 years and without the same success? It's the same in the area of business. Black Lives Matters and others say that, well, blacks are not in business today because of racial discrimination and redlining in banks. Well, what we did under segregation is we didn't have insurance companies, so the churches had burial societies, and they were a source of venture capital. And with that, in 1929, there were 731 owned black businesses in the city of Chicago, 100 million in real estate assets. And this was true in almost every major city where we built hotels, schools, colleges. So there's, in the 10 years of the Depression, the marriage rate in the black community was the highest of any other group, and elderly people during the Depression could walk safely in those communities. I'm sharing all of this with you because these are facts that are not readily available in this country, either by the left or the right. Only in America can we have people who are born in slavery. We are the only nation on the face of the earth to ever fight a war to end slavery. So America should never be defined by its birth defect, but should be defined by its promise. Blacks fought in every war in this nation. Not one was ever convicted of treason. So how can the left say that black America should look with anger or resentment upon this nation? And when you're talking about poor people, I believe that the Bible says, as you do it unto the least of these, you do it unto me. In this nation, that the black community was thriving economically, not that they were in par with whites, but they were achieving at a tremendous number. But the social glue was torn apart in the 60s. What slavery and discrimination didn't do in 100 years, the policies of the Great Society did in just 10. By Clouden Piven, the sociologist at the Columbia University School of Social Work, wanted to promote socialism in the country. Excuse me. They wanted to promote socialism in the country. And so they said, if we can separate work from income, it'll mean that the fathers will be redundant. It means that people will drop out of school. It will bring about the disintegration of the family. They were aided by the Black Panther Party that believed that two-parent households are Eurocentric and therefore racist. Gloria Steinem and the women's movement joined in because they said men are oppressive. And but then the government opened their poverty offices and actively recruited people into the welfare system and made welfare benefits more generous than working. And so what they predicted came true. Within 3 years, the welfare system was flooded. Blacks were flooding into the welfare system. And at a time when the unemployment rate in New York was under 4%. And so what happened, what they predicted was true. You had, with the out-of-wedlock birth, the crime rates went up. Out-of-wedlock birth, drug addiction, all of the pathologies that you see today. And so now, I want to talk about what are solutions. What is a path forward? The first thing we need to recognize that we should cease all failure studies. One of the complaints that I've had about some of my conservative scholars is that you can learn nothing but studying failure except how to create failure. And so what we are doing at the Woodson Center, we think we should apply old values to a new vision of the country. To go back, and in our curriculum, you will see we tell the stories because young people need to be motivated by victories that are possible. So we tell the stories of Robert Smalls and Biddy Mason. And we're doing this in song and movies and whatnot. In other words, if you say that 70% of families in these low-income neighborhoods are raising children that are dysfunctional, it means 30% are not. So we ought to go into these communities and find out how people among the 30% are thriving and achieving, because they are the social entrepreneurs. And so the model that we use for what is the relationship from the people outside to the inside, I find it in the book of Genesis with Joseph. Joseph, as you know, was from a dysfunctional Hebrew family. He was one of 12 sons, and he had the ability to interpret dreams. And he told his brothers that he saw them bowing down to him. That did not endear him to his siblings. And of course, you know, what they did was they faked his death, took his cloak, killed an animal, told the father he was killed, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites, who were slave traders in Egypt. But Joseph did not succumb to bitterness and resentment over being treated unjustly. Instead, he became the best slave in the house of Potiphar, and he was a very handsome young man. And Potiphar's wife lusted for him and tried to get him to have sex with her. But Joseph resisted because he had lateral integrity and horizontal integrity. He knew it was a violation of the trust that his master had placed in him, but more important, a sin against his God. So he resisted and ran out the house, and she accused him of rape. And he was put in Pharaoh's prison at 17. But he became the best prisoner and rose his authority in there. And then when he reached 31, Pharaoh had these dreams that none of his experts, his PhDs or his MBAs could answer. And they remembered this uneducated Hebrew shepherd, and they cleaned him up, brought him before Pharaoh. And Joseph said there, when he was asked, I understand you can interpret dreams, he said, no, the last time I did that, I got in a little trouble. So God does it. I'm merely the instrument of God's grace. As he told him, there'll be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Save up 20% and appoint an overseer. And you know what happened. Joseph became an overseer. If it was not for the good Pharaoh, we wouldn't know about the Joseph. Good, and what are the contemporary examples? Good pharaohs are rich, powerful people who are able to look beyond their the comfort of the moment and look into the future and see a cloud coming and be able to put aside and be blinded by their comfort, but also be able to reach across race, ethnic, and history to a point, an uneducated 31-year-old Hebrew shepherd that God has blessed. Pharaoh was really supporting the secular consequence of God's grace on Joseph because Joseph exhibited excellence. And the Bible says for a time, we don't know who that Pharaoh was because the people who came behind him took him out of history. But we do know that the pharaohs for a time became monotheistic. And let me tell you why that's important. We look for the Josephs today. The modern day Josephs are two types. They are Josephs of old, who was blameless. They live in poverty but not of poverty. They're raising the children and not dropping out of school or in jail on drugs. No one ever goes to ask them how they did it. They are the source of new knowledge and wisdom and understanding about how redemption and transformation occurs. But we don't seek that knowledge. Then the second type of Joseph are those that succumb to predatory behavior. They were prostitutes, they were drug addicts, they were gangbangers. But through God's grace, they became redeemed and transformed, and therefore they are powerful witnesses to people in that troubled neighborhood that redemption and transformation is possible. So what the Woodson Center does is that we go around the country in high crime, drug-infested neighborhoods, and we look for these two types of Josephs. And the qualities that makes them effective also makes them invisible because they are not protesting or whining and complaining. They're not looking for you. You have to find them. And in my book, what I did was I identified the traits of a Joseph, and I gave examples in my book of what you should look for, how to find them, and how to cultivate them and support them. And so right now, the challenge that we face in saving this country to push back against the attack on our culture, the radical left derives its moral authority to do what it does because they say they are the legitimate representatives of the marginalized, particularly the black community. Well, we have 2,500 grassroots leaders in 39 states who are part of our national network, our grassroots army. They're black, they're white, they're Native American. We want to give them a voice to speak for themselves. And what they say is they are the ones who are losing children to violence, not the ones who are advocating defund the police, because the ones who are advocating defund the police don't have to suffer the consequence of what they're advocating, because their children are not dying on the streets. And they use the George Floyds and others as only 19 George Floyds occur in the country, while 6,000 blacks are killed by other blacks. There are more blacks killed by other blacks in 1 year than was killed by the Klan in 40 years. But the priority is focused on the few because it makes the case that America is racist. So our pushback against that is to go in and empower the people suffering the problem to speak for themselves. And once we do, that you will see a change. And we have examples through Curtis Watkins, who's my traveling friend, and Sylvia Stone. We have demonstrated that when you follow the Joseph model, there was a group called, an area, I was training 5 grassroots leaders called the Alliance of Concerned Men in Washington. These are Josephs who went to prison and God touched them. And they had the trust and confidence of the kids. And I was training them in how to intervene. But I said, your trust is diffused throughout. No one can measure your impact. So why don't we concentrate it in one neighborhood? He said, where? And then a 12-year-old boy was killed in an area called Bennett Terrace. where there were 53 murders in a 5 square block area in 2 years. I said, God made the choice for you. They went back into that neighborhood. When the police could not find the leaders of those factions, they did. And they brought them in separate vans to my office downtown in DuPont Circle. And they came in and they had bulletproof vests on. We searched them. You can be spirit-filled but not crazy. And we had a meal waiting for them. And these young men said, no one ever asked us to be peaceful. Long story short, after 2 sessions, these young men shook hands, and the housing authority hired them. The one from the Avenue became the foreman at $8.50 an hour, and the one from the Circle was a foreman, and we have them mixed. If you look in the front page of the paper, they're all in yellow suits, removing graffiti, restoring the community that they tore apart. And with their first paychecks, they bought equipment, athletic equipment for the kids, and celebrated an Easter for the mothers. And so what was down a killing field, we went for 12 years without a single gang-related murder in that community. And because everybody wanted to take credit for it, we decided that the principles that we exported it to Baltimore, we exported it to Dallas, Texas, with the same result. And the reason that we were successful is because the principles that operate in the market economy work in the social economy. Only 3% of people in our market economy are entrepreneurs, but they generate 70% of the jobs. And entrepreneurs tend to be C students, not A students. A students come back and teach at a university, C students endow. And you business people know I'm telling the truth. Because smart people have to have all the answers, and by the time they act, the opportunity's gone. Or as A.D. Gaston, America's first black millionaire from Alabama, he had a 6th-grade education. He said, it's better to say I is rich than I am poor. And so my grassroots Josephs are like those social entrepreneurs. It only takes a few of them to come into a troubled community like Benning Terrace and inspire a whole community to become reformed and transformed. And so what our strategy to push back against the race grievance indeed, let me just bring this to a conclusion, is as Samuel Adams said, that we must diffuse virtue in the population if we are to survive, which means that the radical left is using the conditions of poor blacks as a bludgeon against the country. We must arm them with the capacity to speak for themselves, that the leading cause of death among young black community is homicide for its children. Appalachian whites, poor whites, it's prescription drugs. And among wealthy parents in Silicon Valley, it's suicide. Suicide in Silicon Valley among teenagers is 6 times the national average. There are parents volunteering to stand at railroad crossings because so many children are jumping in front of freight trains. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges faced by these 3 groups, that's what we ought to be spending our time and energy trying to figure out, how to fill that empty hole in the lives of our children so they demean their own life and devalue their life. If you don't have a content and meaning to your life or value your life, you'll either take someone else's or take your own. But in order for us to come together as across racial and class lines to address those problems, and Woodson Center plans to reach out to mothers in each of those areas. Under Sylvia Stone's leadership, she is going to reach out to her moms and bring them together so we can discuss ways to prevent other moms, other children from having to go through the pain that they have. We are going to also initiate efforts to reduce violence by employing the kind of Josephs in there to address it. So we need to be about healing the hurt that's in our community so that we can begin to restore it. We can't do that if we have to look at each other through the prism of race. And so we will hope to have in the fall a gathering that will promote healing and forgiveness from blacks to whites and reconciliation on a campaign so all of us can sign up. In fact, I want to share with you that I am a certified racial exorcist. And I have been given the power to forgive you for racism and slavery. So all you guilty white people, you can just feel absolved from responsibility. All right? Cost you $25 though. I want to get on the race hustle myself. But I would really like, if I could, ask Curtis and Sylvia, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Sylvia, I was moved to tears this morning by reading some of the comments from Glenn Lowry. I want you to introduce yourself, Curtis, and then Sylvia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Curtis Watkins. I work for the Woodson Center and been on staff for 6 years. I'm the director of affiliate mobilization. Fancy title, and to explain it, I work with over 200 some organizations and individuals across the country, providing technical assistance, capacity building, and really listening to what they do to make changes in other people's lives. And today, if Mr. Woodson gives me permission, I'd like to display one of the people that we met in your city yesterday. Terrell, can you come up for a minute? See, this is what we do. We find examples of what we call Josephs. And these individuals are doing wonderful work in the community. And Terrell is one of those examples. So tell me what you do, Terrell.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is really humbling coming from this side of town. My name's Terrell Brown. By day, I'm the scholarship director at Sachs Foundation. We give scholarships to African Americans throughout the state, undergrad and graduate scholarships to change the trajectory of their life. So I'm thankful for that opportunity. And my passion project is Hillside Connection. I'm a kid, sport that was my safe haven growing up, that kept me on the right path. And with the resources and the connections that I was fortunate enough to, build throughout, my formative years, I was able to return back home and just try to create change. And when I say I, it's not myself. It's a group of committed mentors, team members, my father, community organizations that help us do what we do. But long story short, our mission is designed to leverage sport, the game of basketball, to create pathways, opportunities for kids in the community. Starting off with sports as that incubator, enrichment activities, and a long list of things just to make sure they're on the right path to success. So extremely humbled. I wasn't expecting this, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be here, learn from you all, and just share my story and what we're doing in the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Terrell. As Mr. Woodson talks about elitism, Terrell is one of those examples. Terrell is 29, right? 28. And I'm 65, so I'm an old head, as the people in the community would say. And sometimes old heads don't want to listen to young people. But yesterday I had the pleasure to learn from that young man. And he taught us something, and hopefully we exchanged some information. But he's the type of individual that we're looking for when we came to your city. And we call them Josephs. And thank you for what you do, Terrell.
And you're right. Yes.
Talk about your background.
Yeah, my background is I grew up in public housing, and at one point I was part of the problem, and I came back to my community to volunteer to be part of the solution. And I worked with a group of wonderful individuals, which I valued as an asset. And I met Mr. Woodson in 1989. And the way I met him was kind of unique, and some of you guys know the story. I read Mr. Woodson's book, Triumphs of Joseph, before I physically met him. And Mr. Woodson's book, Triumphs of Joseph, is right on point. It talks about community leaders who are doing wonderful work in the community. And so when I got the chance to physically meet Mr. Woodson, it was an honor and a privilege. And ever since then, I've been learning from him. Thank you, guys.
Right. And like Steve, bless him, he brought us in here to find the Joseph, and we found him within a few days. You have a treasure trove of grassroots people that you need to pay attention to, because they are the ones who can rescue this country and rescue this community. But again, the qualities that make them effective also makes them invisible, because they're not whining and complaining or picketing nobody or angry at nobody, because you can't do nothing angry. You can't make love, you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't do anything angry. But be angry. Am I right? Okay, 28-year-old embrace what I said, because he knows you can't do nothing angry. And there are a lot of people who like to keep us angry so they can control us and do what they want to do. And that's why. But I wanted to do Sylvia, and one of our 1776 scholars, Glenn Lowry, Professor Lowry at Brown University, has a very popular podcast. And he interviewed Sylvia last week. And he just sent me the 2,000 responses. And I don't want to put any pressure on it, but this is some of the responses they got. Glenn said, extremely moving and powerful. Sylvia is an incredible woman. Thank you, Glenn, for making this show. It was really moving. That was incredible. Sometimes you hear someone's story and you can't help but reassess what the truly important in life. Another one said, I'm a grown man crying in my car right now. This is so tragic. God bless this woman and all she does for her community. Move me to tears. I am hiking now, listening to her. America can be restored if we just listen to the voices of Sylvia and others like her. With that modest introduction.
Wow. Okay. I'm starting out, right? Good morning, everyone.
You're going.
Wow. Okay. Let me get it together here. I'm not a crybaby. I'm really not. But I've been shedding a lot of tears lately. But they're tears of joy, honestly. My story, I'll start out by telling you my story. Grassroots leader, own organization, doing work with the juvenile offender population until one day my worst nightmare happened. My daughter, her girlfriend, were at a gas station, and they got caught in the crossfire of two guys shooting at each other, of all places, at a gas station. One bullet went through my daughter's body and stopped in the heart of her girlfriend. Both girls died. That was the day that I thought I too would die. And in the coming days and the years, I wanted to die because the pain was just so horrible. This is not something that you can even put in words to describe. This is not who you are. This is not your lifestyle. So, Lord, how did this happen when I thought I gave so much of myself to help so many others, and this happens to me? Well, you know, of course, we have no respect of person when it comes down to what the enemy will do. However, it's about how we respond to that. And that's where I will get to, I think it's a big issue in what is happening in our communities with the violence. It's how they're responding to things. Now, yes, was I angry? Ooh-wee. I went through years of being angry. That didn't solve anything. All that did was put my health in a bad position, in a bad place, and kept me in a dark place. As my brother Curtis said, the dark hole. He used the word the dark hole. It kept me there. It kept the other mother there. So much so till when she died, within the first 5 years, she died. Then I started looking at statistics. Statistics say that 26% of parents die within the first 10 years of losing a child to violence. 92% of marriages fail. So that destroys the family all over again. I was angry. The young man who went to trial was acquitted. So that took my anger to a whole nother level. And because my background had been working with juvenile offenders and gang leaders, they knew me. They knew who I was. They would say to me, "Oh no, Miss Stone, you didn't deserve this. We got this. We gonna handle this." And you know, I knew what they said, what they meant by saying they were gonna handle it. And I would say to them, "I don't need y'all to fight my battle. I'm ex-military, gun owner, expert shooter. If I wanted to fight this battle, I can fight this battle and do it easily." But I had to make a conscious decision. What did I want? Did I want revenge or did I want peace? To think about everything that I've taught these kids the number of years that I work with them. And if I took this matter into my own hands, I would be a total hypocrite. And everything that I taught them would just go out the window. And the one thing I tried to impress upon them is their decision that they make, you own it. So if you make the decision a bad one, you need to own that decision. So I knew I could not give the system control of my life by making a bad decision. I would be in the same position that they are. So what do? I chose to lead by example. And it starts within. We have to heal our communities from within. And when I made that choice, they respected that choice and backed down. And they would say, "No, Ms. Stone said don't touch." So they didn't touch. But I had to lead that by example. And I'll take it further as an example and bring it into my own household. At the time, my son just turned 21, just finished his military training. And could you imagine how many mouths was telling him on the streets, "Man, I wouldn't let that happen to my sister." So I had to challenge him. What are you going to do? Are you going to allow a system to control your life to where you'll be in prison for the rest of your life, or either someone comes back and retaliate and kill you, someone that you love, and it goes on and on and on. So here again, it comes back to that personal decision that we have to make within. And that's what the Voices of Black Mothers United teach others, other mothers who've lost their children to violence. Let go of the anger. One, for your own moral Christianity. Personally, I believe I would see her again. That's my personal belief, and that's what I want. So we go into the communities. We have 3 initiatives. The one is the healing part. Help other mothers heal. You help them heal, they help their community heal. And that becomes contagious. I'll give you an example. We just had a forum of where the police officers and mothers who's lost children come together engaged in a conversation. Never have that engaged in a conversation where police can tell how they feel, community tell how they feel. And we come together. After that, they sat down over a dinner. And out of that, a mother said, police killed my son. And I blame the whole law enforcement for killing my son. Which in fact, now I understand. It was one person, not a whole system. So when she changed her point of view, she was able to go back and change the point of view in her community. Then it really went to another level. There was a guy who murdered. He got out on bond in the same community, got out on bond, next morning went and killed someone else. But because of the barriers that came down between the police and the community, the community gave that guy up. So that's where it starts. That's how we heal. And we have to heal ourselves. It's not a system that make these choices. It's us. We are making these choices to kill one another. And it must stop. It must stop. Someone asked me, well, how do you feel about the fact that no one knows your child's name? And why is that? You know why is that? No one knows my child's name? Because you cannot make money off of her. Mr. Woodson called them race hustlers. They are. My daughter was just this beautiful girl that loved life. She was positively being a great citizen, both of the girls. But she was killed by one of us and not a police officer. So don't no one care. Honestly, if a police officer go out and kill someone, they're going to burn up the city. But 10 people in that same community can be killed by one of us, and you go home and you fix dinner like nothing happened. There is a problem with that. And you don't care until it happens to them. And unfortunately, the percentage and the chances of it happening to them is growing every day. And I personally know what a mother goes through, what a family goes through at the loss of a child. It breaks down the family, then it breaks down the community, and it keeps going. It's a destroyer. But why don't we want to talk about it? But VBMU, we're not only talking about it, we're doing things about it. Just like I said, when we bring together law enforcement and community, and the community say, okay, forget about this snitch policy, we're going to tell about it. Because if he is so awful to kill someone, get out on bond, and kill someone else, do you not think that you or yours may be next? So now we're getting it. But we got to do something about it. And VBMU, we have over 2,500 mothers throughout different states, from Georgia, New York, to Mississippi, to Milwaukee. All over, where we are pulling together as one voice. We're training our community, and we're going forth and bringing solutions. Thank you.
Thanks. We would like to take some questions now, please. Yeah. We would like to open this up, and if you would, and take whatever questions you may have or comments you'd like to offer, or whatnot. Any? Yes, over here.
Hi, Jason Jorgensen, Board Director for District 11. What is your thoughts with critical race theory and the push for equal outcomes? What's our greatest response of a solution to saying the rationale of equal outcomes is not viable, and how do we fight back against that?
I fought in the civil rights movement. Critical race theory used to be called stereotyping. It's a fancy word for stereotyping, that all white people are this way and all black people. I fought against that. That's what we were fighting. We went to jail and gave up lives so we can fight against stereotyping. Not all black people look alike, talk alike, eat the same stuff, and nor do white people. It is a ridiculous proposition that is being used to keep people separated. And you always ask them, well, what is the goal? Tell me what success looks like. And one of the ways that I challenge those, in fact, if you go on YouTube, I debated Hawk Newman, the head of Black Lives Matter, for an hour on these issues. And you can go and check it out. And I said to him, you know, tell me, when we're talking about there were 12 children under the age of 10 who were murdered since George Floyd's death. Tell me how ending racism will address a solution to that. And so all you got to do is hold up conditions that people are facing and say, how would racism address that issue? But there are two groups of people that we've got to deal with, and that is self-flagellating, guilty white people and self-endowed, rich, angry black people with their victims' books. We have got to have the moral courage to speak up and challenge that without fear. If I said that you have a red suit on, and would you be offended or feel? If you don't have it on, then why do you feel bad about it? So that's why we are coming together at the Woodson Center, because we've got to de-racialize race in America. We got to put it behind us. And we're only going to do that when we let people like Sylvia, Curtis, and the people in these neighborhoods who are suffering the direct loss of their children. And it's happening because focusing on race deflects attention away from time and energy and money. $98 million given by corporations to Black Lives Matter for what? If a fraction of that were invested in initiatives like what you heard here with this young man and this young man, they are doing things that produce results of improving conditions. When people bring up critical race theory, ask them how it will improve a condition of people who are most vulnerable. That's the question you should ask them. Tell me, what does success look like if I applied critical race theory? Who is better off as a consequence? The race hustlers are richer. Strong memo will follow. Any other questions or comments? Remember now, you all are exempted from, so you can ask any question. Remember, I gave you your exemption, right? No one's going to accuse you of racist or being a racist if you say, ask the kind of question he raised. So just remember, you got that exemption hanging over you.
Bob, President Biden has described America as having as being systemically racist. What is your opinion of that statement?
I didn't hear the question. But President Biden, I think the president keeps bringing up systemic racism, and no one ever asks him, what does he mean? I don't even know what it means, and I'm black. I don't know what systemic racism means, but he keeps saying it, and it's insulting. I would rather have old-fashioned bigotry. Old-fashioned bigotry is explicit, it is external, it's clear. You don't have to guess what it is. But nothing is more disarming than someone who patronizes. I'd rather confront a bigot than someone who treats me like I'm an impotent child, incapable of doing anything for myself. And that's the message he's sending. Oh, we can just keep black people quiet, just say we're against systemic racism. And then you don't have to ask him about health care, about employment. There were 4 studies done over a 12-year period where they went into the black community and asked them, what are the issues most important to you? And race came out about 8%. Most people want to know about health care, about jobs, about others. And this is about a Joint Center for Political and Economic Study, a liberal democratic think tank. 80% of all black people are against defunding the police. 60% don't believe that racial discrimination is the biggest barrier. You don't know that though, right? Because the press only reports on those race hustlers who benefit from keeping black America angry and aggrieved. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Smith. I'm the wife of DeAndre Smith. We're both one body. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and he told me about everything that happened and the things you guys talked about yesterday, so I'm really honored and blessed to be a part of this community. I'm not from Colorado Springs. By trade, I am, but at the same time, I'm happy to be a part of One Body ENT, Kayla Community Cares, and I wanted to say I was blessed by your story. What was your name again?
Sylvia.
Sylvia. I wanted to say Shirley, I'm sorry. But Sylvia, I was blessed by that story, just hearing your testimony and being able to say that without tears constantly. That's a blessing, because that's hard. I have 2 daughters, and I couldn't even imagine. So I just wanted to say I continue to pray for you.
Thank you.
Yep, so that's amazing. But the opportunity to be here today is really, I'm really grateful. So thank you for presenting this to us. And my heart is in Colorado Springs, even though I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana. Colorado Springs has actually grown on me. I have no choice to do the work that God has called me to do here, and working with kids and being involved with people like Terrell. I saw a picture he had the other day with a whole bunch of girls for basketball, and we have a girls group. So I saw that and I said, they're basketball queens. Just seeing girls do that type of thing, I wasn't able to do that growing up because I'm not a basketball girl. I'm more pretty, so basketball wasn't it. I was worried about matching and all that stuff. So, but anyway, thank you guys for the opportunity. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate everybody that's here that has a heart for the city. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Right here. Right over here. I got it. You got it.
What do we do? My name's Ray Deeney. What do we do with the media presentations that are going on right now? How do we combat that? For Tim Scott to be called
Uncle Tim.
Uncle Tim in such degradation. I mean, how do we address that?
First of all, the question was, what do we do with the media, particularly with Tim Scott being accused Uncle Tim because, you see, if I would advise the senator, I would say to him, stop being defensive about it. Say, if being Uncle Tim means I'm for freedom and justice, then I plead guilty. I was on a forum one day before 5,000 black journalists, and the head of the NAACP was sitting next to me, and he said, "Bob Woodson here is a intellectual prostitute." Well, when someone attacks me, I smile. And my response is, I was always taught that if someone is snipping at your butt, it means you're running in front of them. So we need to stop being defensive when people bring false charges against you. Claim it. I would have a T-shirt if I was and said, Uncle Tim for justice. You know, I would take their charge and turn it in against them. And that's what we're teaching people. But what we're trying to do at the Woodson Center, and that's what we're trying to raise the resources so we can have our own outlets. I was on Black News Network that went to 12 different cities for 3 hours one night. I was supposed to have been on for a half hour. And I was debating these issues with some guest in the studio. And he was so certain. He said, well, let me open up the phones to our audience and see what the people think. 7-1 of the people calling in from Black America agreed with what I was saying. And so that shocked them. And so finally he said, well, Mr. Woodson, Brother Woodson, now that I've had a chance to hear you, he's trying to reposition. But don't you think you do yourself and your movement a disservice when we see you sitting next to President Reagan at a conservative banquet? I said, sir, I will ride on the back of his damn horse holding his waist if I thought it would help my people. That's the problem. It's not about how I look. It's what I'm doing that advances the interests of the people I serve. I don't care what people think about me. And you see, when you take that kind of posture, and so what we've got to do then, but I never got invited back on that station. So what we got to do is we need to buy time on some of those stations that goes out to the target audiences so that people can get our message. Because mainstream media is not going to give us to me. So we have to purchase time on these stations so we can broadcast. You know.
Hey, Bob. The 1776 United consider the antidote to the venom of 1619. And I think you covered this on a scholars call recently. The administration has just announced $1 billion plus for pushing 1619 into our schools. And then we have a school board who's trying to stem the current tide, and now they're pumping up the tide with money to shove this down their throats. Is there any resource at the Woodson Center or 1776 Unites which would help these folks defend or perhaps even run a resolution in their school saying, not in our school, not now, not ever?
Yeah, as I said, we have scholars, and we have we've done seminars, webinars going to school board members and parents at the Woodson Center, and we have on our curriculum that we were invited before the school board of the state of Ohio. Ian Rowe, who was supposed to testify for 10 minutes, was there for 40 minutes, and Ohio withdrew 1619 and put 1776 in. And we want to testify before every school board in the country, and we're developing content so we can give you the content that you need. If you go on our website, 1776 Unites, you'll be able to download all of our content and see examples that you can use to counter that. So we're providing the content you need. We have an illustrator from Disney and also Marvel who are volunteering to come with us so we can do children's versions of this. To counter, because right on Amazon right now in the sociology section, Communism for Kids is a leading bestseller among children's books. Communism for Kids. We need to have a counter in those bookstores. So we're really generating a whole movement to push back against this assault on our culture. But we had 11,000 downloads in a few weeks. So there's a thirst for this kind of content.
I'm Patty Smith, and I attend a mainline Protestant, predominantly white church. And we continually have conversations about racism. And I feel like it's just continuing to foment this separation. How do I, as an individual, respond to the leadership who continues to have the discussion with no obvious or intentions of solutions?
One of the things you can do is share with them content from our website. So it's just not white people saying this. There are black folks who are saying, well, how come there's some black folks don't agree with you? And this is what they're saying. And then what we are saying is, tell me how this content results in improved conditions. And so, but we hope to have an initiative that we were talking about, that all of us can sign up in the fall, that we hope to have something. It's going to be a campaign of forgiveness and reconciliation that will bring together people so we can get race off the table. But so just stay tuned. But please go on our website, 1776 Unites, and share some of the content and some of us are available to do seminars too. If you ever wanted to have a webinar, we've had even parents, people put together a listening group in their home. And we've had 50, we would broadcast and had 50 of them. So we're available to do a webinar for you in your church if you want to get some alternative opinions from people who look like me. Yeah, and our content is free. Even better. Okay, if not, we'll just, if there's one back there.
Hi, I'm Vance Brown. First of all, thank you for being here. My spiritual tradition, I appreciate some of the stories of your books, and least of these, and most powerful being forgiveness. I think that is the greatest message of all, and your story of forgiveness, it truly is remarkable. I don't know if I could do that. So thank you for that, and thank you for the forgiveness you gave all of us. I got your $25. Thank you. I don't know if I've ever experienced anything quite like that. So I know it's somewhat joking, but not totally. But what about, I'm an old white guy. The white supremacist thing going on is a thing. I think it is. And what do we do about that? What do I do about that from a standpoint of, a heart of love, a heart of forgiveness, but a reality that seems to exist in our country?
Again, they're creating a problem that does not exist. This is a manufactured narrative. I don't know of any black folks that I know all over, and I know a lot of them. They don't get up every day talking about white folks, man. They really don't. The way Al Sharpton never wants you to think that we do. We don't. We really don't. And so that's why we are saying that we just need a dose of reality. It's a manufactured crisis. And the president doesn't help by constantly saying it. Again, it's demeaning, it's insulting to say that everything we do and look through the prism of race. We don't. Most black folks in these communities never see any white people all day, every day. You know what I mean? The people you hear from are people who got insulted walking through Neiman Marcus. These are the people who get insulted. Most folks don't go into Neiman Marcus. I was so offended. This black student at Smith College, she's 19. Smith College tuition is $80,000 a year. She came there from a boarding school where the tuition was like $60,000 a year. And she was asked to leave a cafeteria that was off limits to students by a security guard who politely, a cafeteria worker was told to report students. They did. He politely asked her, would she move out because it was off limits? And she got up and left and taped it, got outside and accused him of eating while black. So she wanted to become a racial martyr. And as a result, these cafeteria workers, some of them lost their jobs, and the president required them to take race grievance training. That was insulting and demeaning to them. And then the president had a law firm come in and do a study to see if there was, in fact, race. And the 171-page study said there was no evidence of racial bias at all. But they first punished the cafeteria workers and then studied to see if it was true. So to counter that, we got together signatures of 50 black scholars and activists writing the president, accusing her of racism, and supporting. We have a GoFundMe for those cafeteria workers who are suffering. They worked there 35 years only to be let go. For many of those blue-collar folks in these college towns with the factories closing, it's their only stable job. I talked to one yesterday, and she said, we used to be able to interact with the students. Now we're afraid to. They're stealing food from the kitchen, but we won't say anything now because we don't want to be accused of racism. I mean, what are we doing to those kids? It's damaging. It's teaching them that they are entitled to be treated fairly. Equality of opportunity is what we seek, not equity of outcomes. It's like sitting down to a gambler's table wanting to be assured that you're going to get a winning hand. Life ain't like that. And so that's a long-winded way of saying it is a false narrative. But if we stand up for people in our community to say we should devote our time and our energy and our resources to solving real problems like people losing their children and not spending our time worrying about some black person who was offended at Neiman Marcus. And that truly is the juxtaposition. We're treating somebody offended in Neiman Marcus as if this is the greatest tragedy facing the country. It is not. Losing lives to suicide, to drug addiction, to homicide, that's the real that we must face. And so therefore, in order for us to spend our time and energy and devoting to those solutions, we must get rid of race. And you need to say to the people who are bringing this racist, how does this address the critical problems of the most vulnerable or the least of these? Ask them that. How does that address the challenges facing the least of these? You got to be aggressive in that. But again, take all the defensive plays out your book. You can't win a game playing defense. Yes, ma'am.
Why is everybody laughing at me already? So, my name is Linda, and I work with children. And I want to understand, this is getting really hard. It's getting really hard. It's getting so hard that I can barely carry it anymore. Because the narrative is so loud for these kids. It is so loud. They can't hear anything else. So I've taken it upon myself and to build this culture of affording them the opportunity to learn how to hear themselves. But it's getting really hard. And I think we need to address what's not working. And don't forget to work upstream. People don't want to address preventive. I am so sorry, Sylvia, for you. I am so sorry. And I've lost so many kids over my 27-year career, from suicide, homicide, all of it. And we create this little culture around the arts, and you can call it whatever the hell you want. And I love you, Steve Schuck, you know that. But I can't tell you, Bob, how hard it's getting. And I'm not a whiny ass, okay? And everybody in this room knows that. I am a warrior. I'd like to be a Josephine, Terrell. Okay? But I'm just saying, Bob, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I appreciate Jordan Peterson. And it's really hard because I serve children from a 100-mile radius, East Coast. My friends are gay, black. I was never taught about color. I was never taught gender, whatever. I just was like, human beings, that's what matters. The vehicle was the art. The vehicle was the creative essence. And as we strip this away from children, the only thing they hear is the narrative. So I do have the 6-year-old little black girls that are like, mm-hmm. And then I got the 6-year-old little black girls that are, you're my second mother, Miss Linda. But I have the white girls that don't know where they are. And they're taking drugs. I've got white girls that are killing themselves. I've got boys that are so demasculated, they don't even know what they are. It's getting really hard. Can we talk about the children, please? Thank you for affording me that opportunity. I'm just so grateful to be here. I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
What's your name again?
Josephine.
Josephine. I love it. I love it. From one Josephine to another, I want to thank you for your heart, for your sincerity. I feel your heart. And yes, it is hard. This is not an easy task that we're having to do here. But it is a task that we can push forth and we can make a difference. We can make a difference. Every time that you pour your heart out to one of those children, I guarantee you something in there sticks.
Sylvia, we create some of the most tolerant, beautiful human beings. And their vehicle was a guitar, a drum, a theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get it. And I just so appreciate it. But I feel like we've got to back into it. We've got to back into 2-year-olds. And that's where
We do.
I feel very safe here. Just know I don't feel safe in my artistic community. I get more hate mail from my liberal friends, and I just go, okay, Linda, keep your nose down. It's about the children. It's about the culture. Help them understand who they are and how they can contribute to the positive.
And that's the key, is them understanding who they are. So you are doing the right thing. What my grandmother used to say, you're doing the right thing, you're in the right place with the right people at the right time. So you keep going forth in what you're doing, and that's planting that seed of who they are and that they are loved. We have to change that picture of our children being taught that they are not loved just because they're brown and black.
Right.
And that's a lie. So it starts from within and them understanding that who they are. And those like you.
Even the white boys now, the white boys don't feel love. They don't know where they are. And that's what's so painful. No one knows who they are.
Starting from within. And one of the things I would say, and I'm I'm going to stop talking. One of the things I will say is starting with the parents as well. I've been there. I've been the Josephine on your side, where I had to deal with a child who just been told, I don't like you. I wish I never had you. That's because that parent don't love themselves. They don't understand their walk. So a lot of times we have to deal with that parent. That parent have to show a change within them for that child to start that change. And then the reinforcement come from us. So you keep doing what you're doing.
Let me just close this out, and I'm going to ask Brandon if he come up and give some final remarks. But let me just say to you that be of good cheer. I really think the Holy Spirit is moving this country to it. Bishop Sheen, you should go on YouTube. Bishop Sheen, 50 years ago, just predicted what is happening today. It's very prophetic. But he also said that the reason that the eagle is our national symbol, because the eagle nests high in the mountains, and when the eaglet gets to the point where it should fly on its own, he takes the feathers out of the nest, but also pushes it out, and it falls to earth. And before it crashes, she comes and picks it back up and takes it up to the mountain and keeps going until the eagle learns to fly on its own. He said, America is like that. God is taking us down. It looks like we're us up to the top of the mountain. And I think that moment is coming. That I think we are having some unusual providential connections that we're making. And what we're trying to do at the Woodson Center is connect the vast network of Josephs that we have around the country with the networks of pharaohs around the country. And then we will determine the fate of this nation by telling politicians what to do, because the salvation will not be found by electing the right people to office. They are not the leading indicators. We need to come together as parents, as business owners, as grassroots leaders. This has to be a new coalition of people who defend the principles and virtues of our nation. But the way we're going to win it isn't by issuing white papers. We have to demonstrate to people by our actions that embracing the principles of our founders creates safer, prosperous communities. And we have to keep that level of optimism abound. We have to, if the nation is to be reclaimed, we have to do it. Community by community. And we at the Woodson Center, we're going to link you to your counterparts throughout this country in some unifying exercise. Stay tuned. Brandon?
Well, again, thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories with us and your time with us. Thank you for all of you who are here this morning as well. I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter. It's not that it doesn't matter who we elect. It does matter. But I think we've learned, whether you're from the right or the left or anywhere in between, you can't legislate morality. You can't legislate a changed heart. The only way that we're going to actually change our country and our communities is by becoming involved with them. And I think what you're doing, it's been said that in order to build a healthy culture, you need three things. You need to teach your values, you need to model your values, and then you need to give safe space for people to fail. And I think that's a lot of what you guys are doing. You're creating space for people to learn how to grow into the value that they have. Where you're recognizing the value that people have intrinsically because they're children of God. They're made in the image of God. They have intrinsic, sacred, holy value, regardless of their race, color, creed, country, family, language of origin, any of those things, any of those categories that we like to make up. All of us have intrinsic value. And if we're willing to honor that value in others and listen to one another a little bit, and these kinds of discussions allow us to do that, it creates space where we go, okay, I didn't understand that about you before. You didn't understand this about me. Now we have some common ground. Let's continue to work together where we can continue to honor one another and create that safe space for us all to grow. Amen? Oh, sorry, I'm a pastor. I'm used to getting like the amens. So go ahead. You can just give it to me. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to pray real quick. Lord, we thank you for today. Thank you for what you are doing. And God, would you just continue to breathe on the Josephs of our nation? Would you continue to move in our hearts, in our lives, in our minds, in our communities in a way that honors you, but also helps us to see the good in one another, helps us to love one another enough to call out destiny, to call out potential in our loved ones, in our schools, in our government establishments, in every area and component of our society. Would you come and move and be present? Or we want to see this country change. We want to see our communities change, not for some political ideology, but for the good of mankind. So would you continue to help each of us as we go from here to hear you, to hear what you are doing in this space, and allow us to be instruments of your peace and your goodness. Amen.